they hate you. If you own a business, they hate you. If you paid your student loans, they hate you. If you're a responsible member of the free market economy, they hate you. That's the only conceivable reason why Joe Biden's White House is spending this week attacking business owners who oppose their politically driven bailout of predatory college lenders and deadbeat borrowers. You see, this week, Joe Biden announced without any constitutional authority whatsoever that he was going to simply relieve up to $20,000 in student loan debt. Joe Biden knows he doesn't have that authority. Everybody knows he doesn't have that authority. Here was Nancy Pelosi just last year saying Joe Biden does not have that authority. Watch.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Now, Joe Biden says he has that authority thanks to a COVID emergency. That's literally what this administration claims. 2 years after COVID, after opening the border, more than a year and a half after the widespread application of the supposed pandemic-ending vaccines, there's still enough of a COVID emergency to justify spending $500 billion on student loan bailouts. Now, Joe Biden is lying, of course. Joe Biden doesn't think there's a COVID emergency. Here he was just this week, hobnobbing with the hoi polloi, footloose and fancy-free, Jack. But here's the thing. Joe Biden doesn't need an actual legal excuse to do stuff, just like he didn't need an actual legal excuse to use the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to cram down vax mandates on 80 million Americans before he was stopped by the Supreme Court. Just like he didn't need an actual legal excuse to use the CDC to cram down eviction moratoria before he was stopped by the Supreme Court. This week, Joe Biden called his political opponents semi-fascist. But fascism typically starts with the centralization of power in the executive branch, without reference to the law. Joe might take a look in the mirror sometime, scary as it may be. But what makes Joe Biden's student loan bailout most egregious isn't the fact that it's being done illegally or that it's bad policy. It will certainly increase both inflation and educational cost, as well as reinforcing a corrupt higher education system that damages those who don't go to college. The most damaging thing about the student loan bailout is that Joe Biden is now attacking everyone who pays their bills on behalf of people who don't. The student loan bailout does that automatically, of course. It subsidizes predatory college lenders, hairdressing and cosmetology schools in inner cities that charge students exorbitant fees, major colleges and universities that charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for meaningless, stupid degrees in lesbian dance theory, as well as borrowers who took out loans to pay for their dreams of majoring in theater at the local JUCO. And it does so at the expense of those who actually paid off their student loans. Elizabeth Warren has admitted as much.
My daughter's getting out of school. I've saved all my money. She doesn't have any student loans. Am I going to get my money back? Of course not.
Of course, Elizabeth Warren doesn't care about those who paid off their loans. She doesn't care about the rising price of education either. She loves the rising cost of education. After all, she was a direct beneficiary of the rising cost of education. During the 2010-2011 school year, for example, she was paid $400,000 by Harvard Law School to teach 2 classes. But the Democrats' scorn for those who pay their bills, it's even worse than this. Now they're attacking anyone who opposes them for taking Paycheck Protection Program money. The Paycheck Protection Program was put in place as part of the so-called CARES Act, passed in March 2020, signed into law by President Trump. It passed unanimously in the Senate 96-0 by near unanimous voice vote in the House. It spent approximately $1 trillion to help prevent the complete collapse of the United States' unemployment system during the COVID crisis. The basic idea was simple. The government had forced hundreds of thousands of small businesses to close thanks to COVID. The government promised businesses grants if they spent that money on paying their employees to keep the employees afloat while the entire economy was forcibly shut down. A lot of businesses took that money, and there was nothing wrong with that. They took that money not because they were greedy and not because they were deadbeats, but because the government shut down their businesses. They took that money because the government was begging the businesses to keep their employees afloat. This was, as I expressed at the time, a pretty solid case of a Fifth Amendment taking. The Fifth Amendment says private property can't be taken for public use without just compensation. And shutting down your business and throwing your employees out of a job without compensation is a taking, no question. But according to Joe Biden, you're not allowed to object to bailing out people with a college degree who haven't paid their debt if you took PPP money. And so the White House is now tweeting out the names of political opponents who took PPP money to keep their employees from having to go to the food bank while the government threw them out of work. This is morally reprehensible. It's disgusting. If you're a business owner who just wants to operate and keep your employees employed, the government will shut you down, they'll destroy you financially, they'll promise you help, and then 2 years later, they'll destroy you reputationally. They'll tell you you're a good person for ensuring your employees can support their families. And then 2 years later, they'll use that as leverage to force you to support their politically driven plan to bail out their favored political constituencies. They hate you. They hate you for operating a business. If you operate a business, you see, you probably believe in things like paying off your debts, things like operating within a budget, things like ensuring your employees are productive. Those are the opposite of the things the Democrats believe, that good people renege on their debts and get their neighbors to pay them off, that operating within a budget is a sign of stinginess, and that the most generous people are those with their hands in their neighbors' pockets, that requiring employees to be productive is tyrannical, profit-mongering alienation of labor. Democrats think that work is bad and that those who engage in it are suckers. Here's Nancy Pelosi back when Obamacare passed in 2014 saying just as much.
We want people to have the freedom to be a writer, to be a photographer, to make music, to paint, to start a business, to unleash the entrepreneurship of America, because people would no longer be job locked by their policy, but have the freedom to follow their passion.
Democrats believe that everyone should be able to follow their passion on your dime. And so they are happy to slander you as a deadbeat for being responsible, while praising actual deadbeats for following their dream to become a professional finger painter. You're the bad guy. After all, you're the one who pays the bills. And only suckers pay their bills.